Here we celebrate 3 years of interactive, real-time conversations between ourselves here on the earth plane and our loved ones in spirit. Hello, my name is Sally Stacey, and I have a blend of mediumship which the spirit world are utilising not just to bring messages through, but also to provide concrete physical evidence of our continuation after this lifetime. And they do it in both personal ways, such as in the live conversations, but also in general ways that others have been able to witness firsthand for themselves. Here we're going to focus in on the live conversations which have just surpassed their 3rd anniversary. These are real-time interactive conversations occurring between loved ones here and loved ones in spirit. This is not me interacting and conveying messages. These are people here on the earth side interacting with their loved ones in spirit. The conversations themselves are objective in nature and can be heard if you're aligned very closely to that frequency. I have an alignment to that frequency, and to varying degrees, so do the loved ones here who are participating in the conversations. My team on the other side, who go by the name of Symphony, are at the helm of all that I do, including these live conversations. They are involved from the preparation right through until the live conversations themselves. Now, I have facilitated these conversations for all types of relationships: parents with children in spirit, children with parents in spirit, spouses, siblings, close friends, and so on. But I thought it would be nice to celebrate the 3rd anniversary by focusing in on one particular relationship and the multiple live conversations that have occurred. The relationship is between a mother and her young son in spirit. The little boy's name is Dylan. He is the son of Shelley and her partner, and the older brother of Toby. Just to give a little backdrop, Shelley came across me accidentally. She stumbled across my Facebook groups. She was still in her 1st year since Dylan had transitioned, and she had experienced a couple of readings that hadn't gone very well. She had wondered if her level of grief had played a part in that. So we talked for a while, and we arranged for her to have her first conversation in March 2022, which was also the 1st anniversary of Dylan's passing. From there, Shelley went on to experience 6 more conversations with Dylan, each one building on the last, just as a phone call would do. Dylan's personality shined through his words, and he brought evidence through Dylan's style, which often had his mum and I with huge smiles on our faces. But there was more. Dylan also brought through objective evidence of his continued existence by way of images that he downloaded, talking in the air, a phone call with voicemail message that was received during one of the conversations, sending orbs for his mum, and bringing his brother, who was sleeping, into one of the conversations so they could both talk to their mum at the same time. Some of what Dylan and Shelley shared is private. However, Shelley has given me permission to share what you're about to see and hear. We've chosen some wonderful moments and some mind-blowing moments too. Each of the 7 conversations has been split into chapters, so if you want to jump to a particular conversation, you can do so. Before we start, however, I'd love for you to listen to what Shelley has to share about Dylan and Dylan's life here.
Dylan was special in so many ways. He was our rainbow baby, and from the moment he was born, he brought us so much joy and filled our hearts. He was the most beautiful baby we'd ever laid eyes on, and as he grew, so did his character. Oh, he was the perfect baby, sleeping through from 3 months old, meeting all of his milestones on time, if not before, and he was just a dream in every way. Dylan began swimming lessons at 7 weeks old, and he loved it from the beginning. He was confident in the water, and just before lockdown, he was able to swim a whole width of the pool on his own. Dylan and I did many groups together, and he enjoyed each and every one, from baby massage to baby sensory. And then at 2 years old, he joined a football class with his dad. And then we also did phonics classes, we went to forest school, and we joined an interactive music and storytelling class. Then when Dylan was 3, he went to preschool, and he loved it. He made friends easily wherever he went, but at preschool he made a best friend, and his name was Jake. In the lead up to Christmas, when asked what Dylan would like Santa to bring him, he would respond by saying, 2 bikes, one for me and one for Jake. This just sums up Dylan, kind and caring and always thinking of others. In 2020, Dylan became a big brother to Toby. Dylan was the best little helper and the greatest teacher to Toby, helping him learn to roll, crawl and walk, how to play games, and even how to be cheeky. As Toby grew, Dylan was able to see the perks of having a little brother who doubles up as a playmate. We would spend time out in the garden whenever the sun was out, and Dylan had fun picking Toby up and plonking him on one end of the seesaw and then sitting himself on the other end. Although it was a squeeze, Dylan enjoyed having his brother sit with him in his little Tykes car, showing him how to beep the horn and steer the wheel. Dylan loved being a big brother, and you could see how much he loved and adored Toby. Dylan would always want to join in with whatever Toby was doing. If we had Toby on our knee singing Humpty Dumpty or Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Dylan would hop on our other knee to join in. He'd ask to wear the same outfit as Toby, so he'd often see them both wearing dungarees together. Dylan really was the best big brother Toby could ask for. Dylan was full of character and found fun in anything and anywhere. He had a fantastic imagination and would create fun in every situation. Dylan loved to run, whether this be round and round in the living room, up and down the hallway, or outside in the garden. He wanted to be speedy. We'd tell him to eat all his fruit and veg, and then he would be super speedy, and he always did. Dylan loved being outside, whatever the weather. Whilst out on lockdown walks, Dylan would say hello and smile at each person he passed, spreading joy wherever he went, which always melted my heart. Dylan truly loved life. He was so full of life and always smiling. He was a very happy little boy. Dylan had this special ability to make others smile, and in his short time here, he touched the lives of many. He brought so much light into the world of those who knew him, and even those who didn't. Dylan was everything we could have ever wished for in a child and more. He was bright, funny, brave, happy, loving, kind, caring, and even a little cheeky. He filled our hearts with so much love and joy, and he made us proud every single day. Our love for Dylan will grow more and more each day, and we'll miss him more than any words can express. We were truly blessed to have him in our lives, and we will always cherish him.
Oh my gosh, what a tribute. I too have a son in spirit. His name is Tommy, so I know the pain and devastation firsthand. But Tommy was 21 when he passed. I got to see him become a young adult. I can only imagine what it's like when a child passes that much younger. Through the live conversations, Dylan has been able to do something quite extraordinary. Aside from being able to interact with his mum, to provide her evidence of his continued presence in their lives, and also answer questions that she had for him, he's been able to provide physical evidence of his continuation that his mum was able to see and hear. Now, as I do with all the live conversations, I reached out to Dylan from my garden in the days preceding the live conversation. I connect with him through my mental mediumship, and we have a small conversation. He was thrilled and so excited for what was about to happen. While I'm doing it, I record on my phone at the same time. Now, I do that for the times that I actually hear loved ones in spirit speak in the air. However, I now use those recordings, which are made up of environmental sounds, as the sound source during the conversation itself for the loved ones in spirit to use those sounds to create what they want to say. The conversation got off to a flying start, with Dylan thanking Shelley for being his mum and telling her that she didn't need to worry about him. Then Dylan brought through his first bit of evidence, Dylan's style. He mentioned a memory, a song, and Shelley initially went to the choir songs that she used to practice with him until she heard the melody of what Dylan was singing, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. What was wonderful for me at this point was the fact that Shelley heard the melody and recognised it before I said anything. And it was very meaningful to her because she did used to sing that to Dylan, and it was an incredible comfort to him when he was distressed. In fact, she would start to sing it and he would stop crying pretty much instantly. And when Toby was born, Dylan would also sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with his mum to comfort Toby. Now, as Shelley was listening to the melody, it was very emotional and her eyes welled up with tears. Dylan then said, "It's okay to grieve. I'm always with you." Now, I thought it was important to share that because although Shelley doesn't believe this for one moment, there's a big misconception out there that if you're grieving, it keeps your loved ones away. Nothing could be further from the truth. At one point, Dylan let us know that he was with someone, his mum's uncle, and he asked if he could come through. He actually gave the uncle's name, but I could only hear the beginning sound and the end sound, but that was sufficient for Shelley to know who it was. Now, I'll say at this point that any additional people that join the conversation from the spirit world have to identify who they are and permission given before they join. And Shelley did give permission, and the uncle did join the conversation for a little while. He mentioned to Shelley a memory of when Shelley was little, and he went on to reassure Shelley that Dylan is doing absolutely fine. And he finished with a lovely message for his wife, who's still here. What was lovely at this point was the fact that Shelley could tell the different vocal tones between her son and her uncle. Then a lovely interaction occurred. Dylan said the words we all love to hear, "I love you." But he said them in such a way that Shelley commented that they sounded very musical in tone, to which Dylan responded, "That's because I'm playing the piano." And it had us both laughing. And Dylan did make the comment that it was lovely to hear his mum laugh. What you see here is a stunning image that Dylan downloaded during the live conversation. If you look closely, you can see his mop of blonde hair, his big eyes, even the tiny detail of his nostrils. That's Dylan. What makes it even more special, though, is that it occurred during a live conversation, so he was conveying to us in real time what he was doing. He even let us know where he was placing the image. Now, in real time, usually you can't actually see the image, though there has been the odd occasion where I have been able to. Usually you have to go into the video and alter the light and dark ratio, and the images will appear. And I was able to send Shelley a copy of the original video recording I made, and so she was able to alter the light-dark ratio for herself and see the image emerge. Yet another form of concrete evidence, one Shelley could prove for herself. These image downloads occur in many of the conversations, often with the loved ones in spirit giving us real-time guidance as to where the images can be found. We provide no assistance in this process, no photos, vapor, or anything else. This is all entirely the work of spirit. After creating this masterpiece for his mum, Dylan went on to ask her if she had any more questions, which she did have. Now, if you remember, today marked the first anniversary of Dylan's passing, and Shelley's words here in relation to his passing will have been said by many parents. Do you know how sorry I am? Dylan's reply is something I've heard my own son say, and also many others, in a very similar fashion. You don't have to be sorry. There wasn't anything you could have done. There was no pain. It wasn't happening to me, just my body. I wasn't in my body. I was outside my body. I was in heaven. It wasn't me. Shelley then went on to express a fear that he might reincarnate before she transitioned. Once again, Dylan gave an insightful response. That does not happen. Reincarnation, it does not take me from you. When we reincarnate, the energy doesn't go from our relationship. It does not reincarnate. Every link you've made with me, it's eternal. Shelley then mentioned some automatic writing that she'd been doing, and doubts had set in. Was it real? Was Dylan really involved in this? Dylan's response was really all about trust, and he was adamant, yes, and Shelley could actually hear that for herself. And there was more, so much more. Dylan wished his younger brother a happy birthday. It had been his birthday 10 days prior. He also said that he was in school learning many things. And he mentioned angels being cool, which made his mum and I laugh. Shelley then asked him what the best way was for her to connect with him. And he responded with meditation, that when she learns to meditate, he will speak with her inside. This little boy achieved so much in his first live conversation. He was so incredibly happy, so loving, so full of joy as he talked with his mum. But he also realised that he had an important job to do in answering his mum's questions, and he did so well with that. I'll just finish here with the lovely words that Shelley wrote after the conversation when she'd had time to reflect. It made me smile to see her reference the conversation as a FaceTime call to heaven. Now, the second conversation was held the day after Dylan's birthday, and before the session started, Shelley had asked Dylan to make sure that he brought through evidence which would prove that he was still in their lives, and Dylan didn't disappoint. The first thing he mentioned was the fact that it had been his birthday and how wonderful it had been. That prompted Shelley to ask him if he had been with them on the day. Of course, Dylan said he had, and then he went on to share something very funny that happened in relation to his brother Toby. They had all gone to the beach, and Toby had been running around trying to catch a seagull. Obviously, he didn't catch it, but it had been very funny for everybody to watch. As if to congratulate himself on the awesome evidence he just brought through, Dylan went on to sing happy birthday to himself. That made Shelley a little emotional, as you can imagine. Tears welled in her eyes, which prompted Dylan to tell her that it was important that she grieved, that it was okay to cry, and that he loved her. Dylan then began to talk about rainbows and how much he loved them. And then he talked about a rainbow being in the room where Shelley was sitting. He then specified that it was on the same wall as a balloon. Shelley knew exactly what he was referring to. The picture that you see here, Dylan would call this tree the rainbow tree picture. Dylan then went on to talk about there being another rainbow. This time he said it was outside, and there was a rainbow outside. Shelley shared with me that they had bought a rainbow chime for his birthday and it was hanging on a tree in the garden. One additional person did join the conversation. Dylan shared that he was with his grandmother and she wished to join us for a few minutes. He gave her name, which I couldn't hear fully, just that it was 3 syllables and ended with an A sound. That was sufficiently accurate, and Dylan's grandmother joined us. Shelley never got a chance to meet this wonderful lady, but she was given words of reassurance that she was taking care of Dylan and that they are together. She also had a wonderful message for Shelley's partner. Just as a side note, when Dylan was bringing his grandmother through, he mentioned that he was going to fetch a table. Now that's an inside joke, and many in spirit, when they are in the conversations and are bringing another person through, will bring a table. And they do that because I let it be known that when they're bringing new people to join the conversation, I always envision them sitting around a table when they're talking with us. And that led to this inside joke of them bringing a table at the same time as bringing someone else through. Dylan went on to make the lovely sentiment you see here. I love you, we're together forever. And then he said that we're on a phone call from heaven. And that's something that many on the other side call these conversations, a phone call from heaven. Something that I haven't mentioned yet are the frequency alignments that take place during the live conversations. They began in January 2022, so 6 months before this live conversation with Shelley and Dylan. What happens is that Symphony realigns the frequency of the conversation to more closely match that of the loved one here, so that they can hear more of what is being said for themselves. It was extraordinary when it started happening. People went from being unable to hear to hearing the words that their loved ones in spirit were saying. You can find a couple of examples on my website that reflect the astonishment of 2 parents when they found that they could suddenly hear. Back then in 2022, the actual frequency alignment itself did affect me physically quite significantly. I'd feel woozy during the process. That doesn't happen anymore though. The physical feeling has lessened substantially. Sometimes I don't even feel it at all. In this conversation with Shelley, a frequency alignment had already taken place, but Shelley's grief was heavy, and Symphony proceeded to do something that they hadn't done before. They adjusted the frequency a second time, and it made all the difference. Shelley could now hear Dylan's words. As you can see from what Shelley has written, not only could she hear them during the session, but she was able to still hear them so clearly when listening back to the recording, and also more that she had missed during the session itself. I was thrilled for Shelley when the second alignment happened. At some point, Shelley expressed to Dylan her remorse for the fact that she wasn't able to protect him. And Dylan's response was beautiful. Mum, the only thing you're guilty of is loving me. As often happens in these conversations, Dylan jumped the gun and was answering some of the questions before Shelley had a chance to ask them. And as she sat there, she was thinking, what shall I ask next? And she thought, I'm going to ask him, what is it like there? And as she's thinking that, Dylan pipes up and says, you can ask me anything you like. There are rainbows over here. And it made us both laugh. Next, Dylan mentioned dinosaurs, and he told his mum there was a dinosaur in the room, and his mum couldn't see a dinosaur. He mentioned it being on the side. His mum, like I said, couldn't see anything, but he was quite emphatic. There's a dinosaur there. And then the penny dropped for Shelley, and she saw the pile of clothing that was behind the computer, so out of sight of me, the pile of clothing that she was sorting out on top with some clothing with some dinosaurs on. As soon as she voiced that observation, Dylan quipped, there's your evidence. I'm right there with you. And this bit of evidence describing something that's on the table where Shelley is sitting was going to become a common theme in future live conversations, something Dylan loved to do. Dylan and his mum talked about many more things. At one stage, Shelley asked him what he was doing, and Dylan responded that he was meeting and talking with lots of people, and that he also still liked to walk. And Shelley shared with me that they used to love walking. Dylan was a great walker, used to love walking and exploring. As the conversation was coming to a close, Dylan talked about his brother. He talked about how he spends time with him and how happy he was, and that Shelley was a great mum to him. He mentioned being proud of his mum. And then he finished this session with another rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Only this time he switched up some of the words, which made his mum and I smile. In this session and the previous one, Shelley had said both times that she wondered what he was doing. So as he sang Twinkle, Twinkle this time, he said in the second line, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder what you're doing. A lovely bit of humour from Dylan. This third live conversation was Shelley's first one at Christmas time, and before we started she'd reached out to Dylan, asking him if he could bring through evidence to reflect the fact that he was with them over the Christmas period, and also to let her know if he knew all the ways that she was including him during Christmas time. And Dylan didn't disappoint. First he mentioned that Shelley had bought him some Christmas presents, and that's true. And he followed that up with the fact that she hadn't yet put them under the tree. That was also true. He then mentioned things that were on the table. And if you recall from the previous conversation, he did something similar then. This time he mentioned there were presents on the table. So I asked Dylan if he could describe one of the presents that he could see. He mentioned that one of the presents were for his younger cousin. That's true. And then he went on to say that there were books on the table and they were for Toby. That was also true. And still staying on the theme of what was on the table, Dylan then went on to mention that Shelley had bought a present for his dad, and it had something to do with him. He was within the present. Shelley confirmed that was true, and she shared with me that she'd bought Dylan's dad a t-shirt with a Daddysaurus and two little dinosaurs, and Dylan was one of the dinosaurs and Toby was the other. From there, Dylan mentioned the Christmas tree that was across the room, and he mentioned that one of the ornaments on it had his name on it. Indeed, that's true. And in fact, the fact that he mentioned it being across the room was relevant too, because Shelley shared with me she had two Christmas trees in the room, and it was indeed the one that was across the room that had the ornament on with Dylan's name. Shelley asked Dylan, "Who are you with?" And Dylan responded by saying that he was speaking to her and also other people, that he was speaking with the other people to help them with their crossing over. He commented there's always something to do. And then he said with great emphasis, "Welcome to heaven." And he was demonstrating that that's something that he was doing. He was welcoming others when they were crossing over. He went on to say that he and his mum were a team, a special team, and that he was helping her and he was helping others through his mum. Shelley then asked Dylan if he could share other ways in which they're including him in their Christmas. Dylan immediately responded by mentioning the stockings, that his mum still hung a stocking for him and she still put things inside it. Shelley shared with me that that was true, that she put in candles and books and other things. Dylan then responded to that by saying that each person's name is on their stocking and that's how they can tell the difference. And as you can see from this picture, aren't they beautiful stockings? Shelley then said to Dylan, "There's more." And quick as a flash, Dylan came back and he said, "There's lots of presents and you've put them in my room." And Shelley confirmed that to be true. Dylan then followed that up with the fact that they need to go under the tree, which made Shelley laugh because she'd only actually bought wrapping paper that day. Then Dylan mentioned there being an angel on top of the Christmas tree. He said it was a beautiful angel, and he went on to comment on the fact that he was met by angels when he crossed over, and they looked very different to the one on the tree, but they were still very beautiful. From there he went on to tell his mum that she too had angels around her, and that they too differed from the one on the tree, but were equally just as beautiful. As the session was coming to an end, Shelley wished Dylan a Merry Christmas, and Dylan responded by singing, "I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." Shelley went on to tell me that that was Dylan's favourite Christmas song. Dylan then followed up with a rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, saying to his mum, "I'm singing, I'm there with you and I love you. Merry Christmas." As his mum was listening to the melody, a big smile on her face, tears started to well up in her eyes. On seeing them, Dylan responded with, "I'll kiss your tears away." Such a very tender moment. Now, this particular conversation between Shelley and Dylan wasn't planned. It was instigated by my team, Symphony. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that I was going to witness what I witnessed that day. My team, they're committed to bringing our two worlds closer, and they do so on an ongoing basis in extraordinary ways. But what happened here, it still takes my breath away. On the morning of the 3rd of March, 2023, I went out into my garden and I reached out to Dylan. It was his brother Toby's birthday that day, and I reached out to see if he had a message, and I heard part of his response in the air, "Happy birthday." I was delighted, and a little later I wrote Shelley and let her know that I'd heard Dylan speaking, and arranged a time the next day for us to get together on Zoom so that she could hear his words for herself. No sooner had I sent that message to Shelley, and my team, Symphony, came to me in my mind, and they said that when I spoke with Shelley the following day, they were going to bring Dylan through to talk. They've never done that before. They've never told me in advance of a plan like this that they were clearly organising themselves. So I knew something pretty big was about to happen. So the following day, I met up with Shelley on Zoom, and after I'd shared the audio with her of Dylan speaking in the air, Symphony then told me that they were bringing Dylan through, and Dylan came bouncing into the conversation, so very, very happy to be talking to his mum. He mentioned Toby's birthday the day before, and as he always knows to do, he brought some evidence through. He mentioned something that had happened to his mum's phone when Toby had been playing with it. Shelley shared with me that earlier that day they were travelling to meet with family, and she'd given Toby her phone to watch a film to keep him occupied for the journey. Now, Shelley's phone is automatically connected to her car, which means that the sound for the phone was playing through her car speakers, and that meant that she could hear Toby. And if he was to come out of the app that he should be using, she'd know about it. Out of the blue, as they drove, Shelley's car randomly started playing a song from her phone, and yet Toby was still watching his program. Now that doesn't make any sense at all, because if he's watching the program, that's what she should be hearing. The song that was playing, out of the 900 plus songs that she has on her phone apparently, was "I Will Wait" by Mumford & Sons. That particular song is my primary sign via a song that I received from Tommy. and Shelley's aware of this. So she knew that it was some sort of sign, and it was linked to me and Tommy. So as Shelley and Dylan continued to chat, I began to wonder what it was that Symphony had planned, and I didn't have long to wait. Out of the blue, Dylan mentioned Toby. He mentioned that Toby was sleeping, and Shelley confirmed that to be true. It was late in the UK, and Toby was indeed in bed fast asleep. Then Dylan said to his mum that only Toby's body was sleeping, and that Toby himself was with Dylan, and they were playing and having fun. And Shelley smiled. That was wonderful for her to hear. And at this point, I started to suspect what may be happening next. But nevertheless, I was as stunned as Shelley was when Dylan then said, "Mum, can I bring Toby in? Can he join us in the conversation?" And of course, Shelley said yes. So Toby joined the conversation, and both brothers excitedly talked with their mum, jumping in almost on top of each other occasionally. Have a listen to what Shelley has to say.
It was so surreal to be sat downstairs listening to Dylan and Toby talk, whilst I knew Toby was asleep upstairs. They both took it in turns to talk, occasionally overlapping. Dylan would let us know it was him talking by saying something like, "This is Dylan speaking," whereas Toby would say, "I am Toby." This in itself blew me away, because if I called Toby a cheeky monkey, or referred to him as a little boy, or anything else, he'll correct me and say, "I'm not a cheeky monkey, I am a Toby," and he introduces himself to people by saying, "I am Toby." As I listened to both of my boys talk, I was able to make out some of the words for myself, especially when Toby was speaking.
As the boys continued to chat away, Dylan conveyed the words you see here to his mum. Powerful words, affirming his ongoing relationship with his brother. "I've been waiting a long time to bring you Toby. I will play with him when he's sleeping. We are still connected. When Toby's sleeping, we have so much fun. You have Dylan. I'm not far away from you. I'm with you, always. Listen to me. It's okay to cry. You have Toby and also me." Shelley asked Toby if he played with Dylan when he was awake, and Toby responded with an emphatic yes. And Toby continued to talk. He talked about his birthday, how much fun he'd had, and he mentioned that they'd been somewhere where he'd seen animals. I recalled at that moment that I had seen pictures of Toby's birthday, and there had been animals. And then I suddenly realised when Dylan came through, he brought through amazing evidence that I couldn't possibly know, and I needed Toby to do similar. So I asked him if he could tell me something about his birthday that I couldn't know. Toby replied, "I saw some donkeys." Shelley then shared with me that they did in fact see donkeys that day. But what was really significant about Toby talking about the donkeys was that when they were looking at the donkey, Shelley had asked Toby if it was the wonky donkey. This was in reference to one of Dylan's books that they read to Toby, which Toby loved, and so did Dylan. In fact, Dylan loved this book so much that on one occasion when they took Dylan to hospital, Shelley was able to recite the book before settling to sleep that night. She had read the book so many times to Dylan that she knew every word. So seeing donkeys always had a special meaning for them. Toby then went on to comment that yes, he was still sleeping, but he was here with Dylan, and Dylan was with him. I then remarked to Shelley about how wonderful it was to be talking to both of her boys together. Shelley then told me of her request to Dylan to be with Toby on his birthday. Here Dylan was demonstrating to his mum that he spends a whole lot of time with his brother on an ongoing basis. Together, the two boys were demonstrating this in the most beautiful and stunningly evidential way. As the conversation was drawing to a close, I asked both boys a question. Dylan and Toby, anything more to say? And both of them replied to their mum, "We love you. Go to sleep and we will fetch you. It's Dylan and Toby. We will come and fetch you." Such a wonderful closing sentiment from her boys, and I'm sure that when Shelley sleeps, that she often spends time with both her boys together. This live conversation took place the day after Dylan's transition date, and Dylan came bouncing into the conversation, so very happy to be speaking with his mum. The first thing he did was tell her how much he loved her, which brought a huge smile to Shelley's face. Shelley went on to ask him about what they had done on his transition date, but Dylan had first wanted to talk about something else. He mentioned that his mum had been in their garden, doing something that they would do often together, and that the flowers were blooming and there were lots of petals. And he then mentioned something special that had fallen onto the ground. Shelley then shared with me that something had fallen over in the garden and it had sheared off one of the daffodil stems, and the flower had indeed fallen onto the ground, and she'd picked it up, brought it inside and popped it in a vase. Dylan then mentioned something that was in the garden that had his name on it, and Shelley knew exactly what he meant. It was a sign that they had, a little garden sign that did indeed have his name on it, but they put it away for storage over winter. Dylan then quipped back, "It's time that they got it out and put it back in the garden." It made both Shelley and I laugh. Dylan then went on to mention that Shelley still read to him when Toby was sleeping. That was news to me. What beautiful evidence for Shelley. And he then mentioned that she had been surprised when he'd come to her. I didn't know what that meant, but Shelley knew exactly what he was talking about. There had been times when she would be reading a story to him and she would see a flash of light in the periphery of her vision, and Dylan did confirm that was him. Dylan then went on to mention another current time event. Toby had been sleeping in bed and had become very cold, and his mum had done something to make him warmer. She'd put something else on him because he was cold. Shelley confirmed that this was true. A couple of nights before, Toby had semi-woken in the night and had been crying, still curled up half asleep, and Shelley had popped a blanket on him and turned the heating up. Shelley then asked Dylan the same question she'd asked a little earlier. Could he tell us something about what they'd done yesterday? Now, although Dylan had already brought up a little evidence in relation to the daffodils, Shelley was now hoping to hear more. Dylan didn't disappoint. He said that they had gone to a place they used to go to, somewhere outside. It was something they used to do. They liked to walk around. And then he shared that when he was physically still here and had gone with them, Toby wasn't walking. He was in a pram, in a buggy, and had to be pushed around. And it was different this time because Toby was walking. That was true. And just to finish off, he added at the end that there had been ducklings there, and that was also true. Fairly soon afterwards, the conversation came to an end. Dylan brought a little bit more through, including something about rainbows, which was evidential for Shelley. But then it came to an end, and Shelley and I stayed on the Zoom link, and we were just talking about the conversation, how amazing it had been, and we were lost in the wonder of it all. And then my phone rang. And that's so unusual because I keep my phone on silent during these sessions, but nevertheless it was ringing, and I let it ring. And I explained to Shelley why I was doing that. Since my son passed, I've had dozens of calls come through from the spirit world, and when I leave it to go to voicemail message, they'll often leave messages. My son especially, but also my team, friends I've had, And also, the loved ones of others that I've had connection with have come through on the odd call as well. Sometimes the whole call is purely them speaking. Other times they tack on what they're going to say onto a cold call. And that's what had happened here. Not that I knew it at the time. So I let it ring, and then it kicked into voicemail, and Shelley and I continued to talk. And I had a quick look, and the voicemail message was exactly 18 seconds long. Now, 18 is my number sign from my son, and I had a feeling that he had something to do with the call. Shelley and I continued to talk after I'd shared that with her, and a little later on she glanced at her phone, and the time was 18:18. Just mind-blowing. And I knew at that point that Dylan was also likely involved in the call. So a little later on, I had a listen back, and sure enough, both boys are talking. So what you're going to hear next is the original call. So you'll hear the cold call with some talk at the beginning and at the end by the boys. And then you'll hear it again, where I've edited the audio to make it a little easier for you to hear the words. Enjoy.
Hey, Sally, this is Daniel over at Balloon of Lake Worth. You probably remember us as Knox Medical. I'm just calling you to wish you a happy early birthday and just let you know that we're offering you an extra 5% off of all of our discounts that we got going this month to help you celebrate. Hope to see you out here and take advantage of that. Have a great day. Hey, Sally, this is Daniel over at Balloon of Lake Worth. You probably remember us as Knox Medical. I'm just calling you to wish you a happy early birthday and just let you know that we're offering you an extra 5% off of all of our discounts that we got going this month to help you celebrate. Hope to see you out here and take advantage of that. Have a great day. Hey, Sally, this is Daniel over at Balloon of Lake Worth. You probably remember us as Knox Medical. I'm just calling you to wish you a happy early birthday and just let you know that we're offering you an extra 5% off of all of our discounts that we got going this month to help you celebrate. Hope to see you out here and take advantage of that. Have a great day.
In the summer of 2023, I went home. I spent a few weeks in Europe and a fair bit of time in the UK. And that provided an opportunity for me to do some face-to-face live conversations, and they were wonderful. And this conversation with Shelley was one of those conversations. And we found a quiet room, and we sat together on a sofa, and I had my computer on my lap, and Shelley was able to see the sound wave that we were using and the fact that it didn't change at all, and yet she was hearing so many different things. It was just lovely to be sat together physically in the same room, to hug each other, to laugh together, and just to experience it that way, having had so many live conversations online, thousands of miles apart. Have a listen to what Shelley has to say about it.
Each and every session I have experienced with Sally has been so special. But there's something different when you're able to experience the session in person. There are moments when the tears will flow, and to be able to hug the other person in those moments makes it all feel like a shared experience. Although we're told that our loved ones can be in more than one place at a time, this is a hard concept for me to wrap my head around. Meeting with Sally in person and talking with Dylan whilst we're in the same room allowed my mind to accept that Dylan was also in the room with us, more than it perhaps does when Sally and I meet over Zoom and are many miles apart. I also found it fascinating to have the opportunity to see behind the scenes and to be able to watch the sound wave, which doesn't change, and yet hear the different sounds being made. It was amazing to have the opportunity to meet Sally in person, and I'm so pleased I got the chance to do so. I'll always cherish any session I get to have online, as they're so special in themselves, and nothing can take away the phenomenal experience of speaking to my child who I miss more than any words can describe, and who I love beyond measure.
Shelley and I were on a retreat that weekend, and I had wondered, would Dylan bring something through in relation to the weekend itself? And he did. He did talk about the retreat we were on. And then he talked about his dad, who was looking after his brother Toby. He mentioned that they had gone to a Star Trek event. So I asked Dylan if he could tell me something about the Star Trek event. And he said that there were people who were dressed up as aliens. Now, Shelley didn't know at that time whether that was the case or not, but she did check in with her partner later on, and that indeed was the case. And he sent this photo. As you can see, there are people dressed up as aliens. As Shelley and Dylan were talking about different things, Dylan mentioned about Shelley needing to have trust in their connection. As he was talking, Shelley could hear music in the background, and she mentioned it to him. And Dylan responded with the fact that he loved the melody. It's a song from Dylan for my mum. And he then mentioned a book about a little boy. That's my song for today. Now, a bit later on in the conversation, Shelley does comment that she can hear the melody of Christopher Robin. And I wonder if that indeed was the melody at this point too. Dylan went on to make the observation that there were many rainbows around where we were staying, and he wasn't talking about in the sky. I think it was Pride Week that week where we were staying, and he then went on to tell his mum every time that she saw a rainbow and thought of him, he was there. From there, he then brought up the fact that someone was having heart problems, had had heart issues, and Shelley then responded that yes, her partner's godmother had had 2 heart attacks. And Dylan then quipped back, but she isn't family, she's just a friend. And that's evidential because of what Shelley then shared with me next. She's actually known as an auntie. That's what she's called, an auntie. But indeed, she wasn't actually family. She was a close friend. Dylan then swiftly moved on from the rather serious subject of someone having heart issues to randomly mentioning that there were elephants in his home. And not only that, but there was an elephant in the room where the TV was. Shelley confirmed, yes, she does have elephants in her home, and there is one in the room where the TV is. Shelley then asked Dylan what he thought of the new books that she was reading to him, and Dylan responded that he loved them and shared that there was an animal in the story. Shelley then asked him if he could name the animal, and Dylan did, but I couldn't fully hear it except for the fact it was a 1-syllable word, which is true. Dylan did go on to share, however, that the animal had got itself into trouble and that a boy, someone special, just like Dylan, had rescued him. Shelley confirmed that that was true. She shared that the book she was reading was a Christopher Robin book, and the animal involved was Winnie the Pooh, a bear, and he had indeed got himself stuck inside Rabbit's house, and Christopher Robin had come up with a solution as to how he could get out. At that point, Shelley mentioned that as Dylan was talking, she thought she could hear the melody of Christopher Robin, and that reminded me that earlier on in the conversation, Shelley had heard a melody, and Dylan had shared it was a song about a little boy. So I think they were probably connected. As the conversation was ending, Dylan shared some wise and supportive words, geared very personally to Shelley and her spiritual journey. He went on to add at the end that they were very much a team, that he was sending her thoughts on an ongoing basis, and that she was amazing. The 7th conversation was just before Christmas time, the 23rd of December 2023, and Dylan came through in a very happy, buoyant mood, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and stating that it was Christmas every day in heaven, just as much fun as it was when he was at home with Shelley and the family physically. A wonderful way to start. Dylan didn't waste any time bringing through evidence. The very next thing he said was the fact that his mum had just been signing cards. Sure enough, Shelley had just been doing that. Now, she hadn't sent any Christmas cards out since Dylan's passing, but this year Toby had had a picture taken at preschool that was very Christmassy looking. So she decided to have a small batch made of Christmas cards, and she had literally just been signing them while she was waiting for our conversation to begin. Next, Dylan mentioned snow, and there's snow. So I'm thinking, was there snow on those cards? But Shelley had a big grin on her face. And Dylan followed through and said, there's snow on the table. She knew exactly what he meant. And as you can see in the picture, the snowman there is something that Toby had made. And on the base, he'd used cotton wool to represent snow. And it was on the table. Dylan is now on a roll. And he mentions a snowman, a single snowman. And it's shining. And indeed, there was a snowman on the table, as you can see, and it does light up and it does shine. Then Dylan mentioned that he went swimming. He shared that his mum had been teaching him and that he loved to swim. Now, you may recall that Shelley mentioned about Dylan swimming when she shared about his life here, but in this session, this was the first time I knew of his love of swimming. And he also mentioned that Toby loved to swim. Shelley shared with me then that she always invited Dylan to join them when they went swimming. And then Dylan mentioned a memory in relation to swimming. He said to his mum that she was nice with him when he was swimming, and that sometimes, once in a while, he was naughty and he swam away from her. Shelley then shared that because he was a good swimmer, sometimes he'd swim off thinking he didn't need her. Dylan mentioned that Toby was playing the piano, and I was surprised because Toby's so young. And I asked Shelley and she said no, but Dylan came back with the fact that he's playing the piano. And I asked Shelley, do you have a piano? And she said no. And then Dylan said, it's in my room. And then Shelley realised what he meant. Dylan had a keyboard and it is still in his room. And when Toby's allowed to go in his room, he always makes a beeline for the keyboard and plays it. Being as we'd been talking about Dylan's bedroom, Shelley took the opportunity to ask Dylan about what he'd feel about Toby moving into his bedroom. And you can see Dylan's response here. He was aware of Shelley's misgivings about Toby moving in because the room was pretty much as it had been when Dylan had been physically here. And of course, everything would change. But Dylan was very reassuring. He acknowledged her feelings, that it was normal to feel the ways that she was feeling, but just reassured her that it would be fine for Toby to move in, that some of his things could be kept in there, and there was still his energy within the room. We then had some more fun and games with Dylan. He mentioned that there was a flower on the table. Shelley said no, but in the back of her mind she was thinking of some flowers that she had been given that morning, but they were somewhere else. But Dylan was adamant, no, there was flowers on the table. Shelley looked around and sure enough, there was a seed packet that she had gotten for Dylan for Christmas. And as you can see, there were flowers. Now, it's quite a long story behind the orbs. Suffice to say here is they're brought through my energy fields and they're amazing. So many people experience them in the live conversations or standalone occasions that I allow loved ones in spirit to send. They sometimes call them light energy bubbles. They send them through me, through a portal, through me and through my energy fields. So in relation to Dylan, I made the room a little darker and I began to film. And in real time, Shelley got to watch Dylan's orbs. There were many orbs and they were beautiful. Often, though, there are coloured ones. And I think Dylan had been hoping to bring through coloured ones, but perhaps because this has been a very long conversation, almost 2 hours, maybe perhaps his own energy, or certainly mine, wasn't at the level it was at the beginning. But the orbs were stunning. there just weren't colours there, and he expressed his disappointment. But we were just overjoyed with what we had seen. And when I played back the recording to look at the orbs, there was actually voice there as well. Have a listen. Oh, did you see that?
That was some good, yeah, there was some good ones then.
Wow, you see the flash?
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Oh, did you see that?
That was some good, yeah, there was some good ones then.
As mentioned, Dylan came back briefly after he'd sent the orbs, and he finished off with one final lovely little bit of evidence. He said that there's a ribbon in the room falling from the tree. There's a ribbon. It's really pretty. And as you can see, there was ribbon on the tree. It looks beautiful. So the very next day was Christmas Eve, and I was holding a meditation with some of the parents in the Heart Smile Circle community to connect them with their children. And after the meditation, orbs were sent through. And as I'm filming all these amazing orbs, I actually shared what Dylan had said about it being Christmas every day in heaven. And as I'm speaking through what he had shared, Dylan came in and he sent his mum a coloured orb, his favourite colour, my favourite colour, yellow. In a session I did yesterday, the little boy said, "It's Christmas Day every day here in heaven." It makes me very happy to know. It makes me very happy to know. You may be wondering what's happening. I had mentioned 7 conversations, and here we are. We're about to talk about an 8th one. Well, Shelley had another conversation on Dylan's anniversary, which just so happened to occur before I'd finished putting the presentation together. And I'm just delighted and so pleased that we're adding it in, because it really demonstrates how these conversations build on each other. You'll hear me reference several times back to subjects that have been mentioned in previous conversations. Dylan started the conversation by bringing up the topic of meditation. Now, you may remember that in the very first conversation that Shelley had with Dylan, he did bring up the topic of meditation and Shelley learning to meditate. Now he was bringing up meditation in relation to the status quo, giving Shelley sage advice in relation to her own practice. One of the things that he shared, and I'm sharing here now, is not to compare your meditation journey with that of another. Then Dylan mentioned something that he could see on the table where Shelley was sitting. If you recall, this was one of Dylan's favourite ways to bring evidence through. I think since conversation 2, he's always mentioned things that have been on that table. This time he mentioned there being a light, something for Dylan. He was describing the light in a way that I couldn't fully understand. So I asked him, "Dylan, can you describe it in a different way?" And he did. He said it was only little. And I thought I heard him say it's baloo. But he was actually saying it's a balloon. Balloon, very close. He said it's a light. And he said you take a journey. I'm conveying this to Shelley, not really understanding what he's saying, but Shelley fully understood what he was saying. He said you can take a journey. It's a symbol of a journey. And in the middle, it lights up. Shelley confirmed that it was indeed a light and that the journey description was something she could understand. Dylan went on to say, the light is in the middle. That's my favourite part. The light, it's glowing. And you can see here what Dylan was describing. A beautiful hot air balloon. It does light up in the middle. And hot air balloons do take journeys. Shelley did mention that it was a solar-powered light as well, to which Dylan responded that he too would light it up. Then Dylan brought up the topic of his bedroom. Now, this subject has come up before. I think Shelley broached the subject in a previous conversation in relation to Toby potentially moving in to Dylan's bedroom. This time Dylan brought the subject up to reinforce all the positive reasons as to why Toby should move in. And he finished up by saying that he has a fire station in his bedroom and that Toby has a fire engine. Toby could bring his fire engine into his bedroom because the two go together. Shelley then shared that Toby himself had mentioned moving into Dylan's room only just recently. Dylan then told Shelley that he'd seen her when she'd been very sad looking at some of the photos. And Shelley shared with me that that had happened when she was putting some of the photos together for this project that you're watching now. And I get that. But Dylan responded by saying how inspiring it all was and how happy he was to be involved in it and how they would be helping so many people. And he referred to the conversations yet again as phone calls from heaven. Dylan then went on to share about a few other things. He talked about all the things that were on the table, suggesting that his mum needs to clean it up. And then he made the observation that he was much more tidy than his brother Toby, and Shelley confirmed that to be true. And then he shared a lovely bit of evidence in relation to the photo you see here. He mentioned there were pictures in the room and that there was a favourite one of him, and he was sitting. And as you can see in this gorgeous baby photo, Dylan was indeed sitting, and it is a favourite. At some point, Shelley asked Dylan if he'd met a particular auntie. Now, I didn't know at that point that she was referring to someone that Dylan had mentioned in a previous conversation when she was still alive. He'd mentioned her in relation to having a heart condition, having heart issues. So Shelley asked this question, and Dylan responded that yes, he had met her. She was with her family and also with him. And he followed that up by asking his mum if she wanted to talk with her. That made Shelley smile. She was very close to this lady, and she had only passed just a month ago when this auntie came through. Shelley and I could immediately tell the difference in vocal tone between the auntie and Dylan. It's quite extraordinary in itself. And after greeting Shelley, she brought through evidence in the most wonderfully personal way. She said to Shelley, "Drink up your tea, Shelley. Don't waste any of it." And she said this in several different ways, and Shelley knew exactly what it was meaning. In life, she would never waste tea, hot or cold. She would always drink it all. And Shelley's one of those people that when her tea goes cold, that's it. Doesn't get drunk. Shelley then asked her how Dylan was doing, and she responded that it had been so wonderful to see Dylan when she crossed over, that he had been so excited he'd been jumping up and down, and he'd said, "Welcome to heaven." Again, if you remember back to a previous conversation, Dylan had actually shared that he loved to welcome people over there, and he had emphatically said, "Welcome to heaven." And here it was being shared by somebody that he'd welcomed. The conversation between the auntie and Shelley finished with the auntie telling Shelley that she was there for her. She knew that she was still grieving and told her to lean into my energy and I'll help you in any way that I can. Once the auntie had left, Dylan started to talk again, and he said that this auntie always used to hug him when they were both here in the physical, and she still hugged him now they were both back in heaven. Shelley then asked Dylan if he'd been with them the previous day, and Dylan confirmed that he had been, and he shared about the fact they had been out, that Penny, their dog, had been with them. He shared something about a stick. I couldn't quite get in relation to what. Shelley shared with me that they were looking for a stick for Toby to play with. Dylan then shared that Toby was full of sand, and he was. And then he shared that Toby was also not very happy at the prospect of leaving when they had to go. Shelley confirmed that also was true. They then went on to have a conversation about communication, and Dylan said to his mum that I send you lots of thoughts. You are thinking of what you want to do, and I whisper to you, and you think it's you. It's Dylan speaking. It's sent from me, Dylan. Now, when he said that, I asked him, how do you suggest that your mum discerns between her thoughts and you? And Dylan responded, ask me a question and think of me, and the answer will come. Just try it and see. In other words, he wanted his mum to go through the practice of trying to connect, asking him things, waiting for responses, and then learning the discernment of how it feels, the response that comes back. Dylan then switched from talking about telepathic communication to how she could feel him. And he mentioned her feeling nice and warm inside. And when that feeling comes, that it's him. That's his way of hugging her. Now, Shelley is not sure if she's had that feeling yet or not. And if she did, she would have probably dismissed it. But she's going to remain aware for it now going forwards. Dylan then brought up the fact that he was with a dog, and Shelley did confirm that she had had a dog who had passed over 20 years prior. Dylan mentioned the dog's name, but I couldn't quite get it. I could hear it was 2 syllables, and Shelley confirmed that to be true. Then Dylan had the great idea to try and describe the dog's name to me in a different way. Unfortunately, I didn't initially hear that either. He said it's a da-da-da name. It's a da-da-da name. And I couldn't quite hear it. And listening back, I could hear he was saying, it's a little doll's name. It's a little doll's name. And Shelley shared with me that the name was Pippa. And I do know of a little doll called Pippa. My daughter had that little doll when she was young. Shelley then asked Dylan why he was talking about dogs this particular day. And Dylan responded, that's a great question. He then said a couple of things I couldn't really get before he was talking about in front of Shelley. It's a wonderful thing. Shelley then shared with me that indeed in front of her on the table was a birthday card and present for Penny, their dog. Dylan then responded to Shelley saying that Penny had been jumping around the table, and Shelley confirmed that to be true. As the conversation was coming to an end, Dylan shared a lovely memory. He said to his mum, you'll find a penny on the floor. There's a penny on the floor. And his mum knew exactly what he meant. She used to joke, if we need a bit of luck, we just pick Penny up. Find a penny, pick it up. All day we have good luck. I could be paraphrasing here, but what a wonderful thing for Dylan to share and remember. Having collated the glimpses into these incredible interactive live conversations between Shelley and her son Dylan, I began to wonder how I was going to conclude the presentation. So I decided to take my 2 dogs for a walk in our community just to see what came to mind. As I started walking, I decided to use the voice to text option on my phone just to put down some of my thoughts. What happened then just blew my mind. As I dictated the note that you can see, a red car cut across my path into a driveway, sweeping into the garage in one smooth motion. Now red is my son's colour that he often uses when sending me signs. So on seeing the red car, something stirred within me. On glancing at the car further, the number plate details took my breath away. D and S. Dylan and Shelley. Had I not been at that location at that exact moment, the synchronistic event would not have occurred. Immediately I felt myself caught up in the unseen web that connects us all. I have no doubt that I was receiving a nod of acknowledgement, of encouragement in relation to this celebration of the 3rd anniversary of the live conversations. As has happened before when synchronistic events like this occur, I found myself filled with gratitude for the reminder of my part within a much larger, intricate tapestry of existence. Just amazing, isn't it? So the moments shared in this presentation really reflect the interactive and evidential nature of the conversations, and why those in spirit often refer to these conversations as phone calls from heaven. And just like phone calls, the conversations build on each other, as you've seen. New topics are explored, and previous subjects are brought up again and expanded upon or discussed from a new vantage point. Shelley has experienced conversations with Dylan on his birthday, on his transition date, and around Christmas time, adding extra flavour to those particular conversations. Beyond the vocalised communications of the conversations themselves, I'll sometimes hear those in spirit talking in the air when I'm preparing for the live conversation. That is my absolute favourite way to hear the spirit world, to hear them communicate in the air around me. And you'll find plenty of examples of that on my website. And of course, during the conversations, loved ones in spirit also have an opportunity to create other physical evidence of their continued existence. One way is by downloading images, and you saw the beautiful image that Dylan created of himself in his mum's glasses, telling us in real time that he was doing it and where he was placing the images. And now Shelley has a copy of the original video and is able to bring out that image for herself. The orbs, or light energy bubbles as they're often referred to by my team, is a relatively new phenomena that my team introduced to me in the summer of 2023, and they've become integrated into many of the live conversations. They too are an interactive experience. In real time, loved ones here get to witness the orbs that are created by their loved ones. They can talk with them. They can ask for specific colours, and real time see their requests come to fruition. Absolutely stunning. You can see examples of this particular type of orb phenomena on my YouTube channel. I'd like to finish by thanking my team, Symphony, of whom my son Tommy is a part of, because without them, none of what has come to be would be happening. I'd also like to thank Shelley for all that she has done, all she's contributed in helping to bring this together. And of course, a huge shout out to Dylan, Shelley's beautiful boy in spirit, who is the focus of all the 8 live conversations that have just been shared with you.